Good evening, everybody, or good morning, or good afternoon, because at this point you can watch this whenever you need to. My name is Lisa Morris, and I'm Assistant Vice President of Public Relations here at Hudson Valley Credit Union. And we're so glad that you could take some time to join us in talking about child cybersecurity. For many years, I've taught classes for the credit union about internet security, but mostly geared towards older adults who find themselves unfortunately victimized because they're not familiar with their computer. Well, now we're raising an entire generation of digital natives. And we were talking the other day at the credit union about how interesting it is that thankfully many of us didn't have our teen years broadcast to the entire world. And so many of our children these days are on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and heaven knows what is going to be the next thing that they think of. So how do we keep them safe? How do we make sure that they understand the ramifications of what they're dealing with when they're on the internet? So we've put together an interesting panel tonight, and I'm hoping that you will join me in welcoming them. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can later on. So first off, I'd like to introduce Josh Drew. Josh, tell us about yourself.
Hey, thanks, Lisa. Hey, everybody. My name is Joshua Drew, and I am the Information Security Risk Officer here at Hudson Valley Credit Union. I'm born and raised from the area, went to Arlington High School, go Admirals, and I really look forward to sharing some tips on how to keep your kids safe and secure online.
Thank you. And Laura.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having this, Lisa and Josh. It's so nice to be here. I am a licensed social worker. I work by day in a local school district. And then on the side, I'm the founder of Be Big, Be Brave. It's a company that provides youth enrichment program to kids throughout the Hudson Valley. And the programs I run are everything from flag football for girls to mental health workshops. I run a program called the Brave Project, and I'll talk about that a little bit later when I talk about the programs that are out there to keep your kids safe.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And for those of you who are joining us and we're expecting to see Detective Sestarnik, unfortunately, he may not be able to be with us this evening. He might join us at a later point. But if not, you can always send your questions to me at community@hvcu.org. That's community@hvcu.org. And I will try to get in touch with him to get those answered for you. All right, so Josh, let's start off by talking about access. Our children's ability to access the internet is way beyond what we grew up with. Let's talk a little bit about all the different ways that parents need to kind of keep an eye on them.
Yeah, sure. So the Center for Cyber Safety and Education actually did a study and found that 90% of children in grades 4th through 8th actually have access to either a tablet, a phone, or a computer. And that number is way higher than I had, at least growing up. So access is important, right? We can't defend what we don't have. So a couple tips on access. The first one being is regulate usage times, especially in the evening. So there's some apps like screen time that you can use to regulate the usage that a child's using their phone during the day. You can set hours that they could use it in. But the at night time is really important because that's typically where we see the most dangerous activities when the parents have gone to bed and the child has full reign of their phone. So maintaining that time frame of when they can use their phone is really important. The second one is preventing usage in private. So like they say, out of sight, out of mind, right? We can't defend what we don't see. And when a child has their phone in private and they can use it completely with unfettered access and we don't know what's going on. And then in that same vein, if there does have to be a computer in the bedroom, make sure the computer screen is facing the door, right? So it's broadcasting what they're doing. Kids are very fast at changing screens today, but when the screen is broadcasting all day to public view of what's happening, they're less likely to actually go to those dangerous sites. And then the one I like is around keeping devices in a central location in the evenings. So a parent once told me that they tell their kids that, oh, the phones are sleeping for the night, right? So they all go to sleep in a central location, and that removes the device from the child's access during the evening, and they can get it again in the morning. And then the last one, which is a new one, is consider signing a device contract with your child. So this one kind of sets the groundwork and the framework with your child, knowing that the phone is a privilege. When mom and dad call, you'll pick up. You got to maintain good grades to keep the phone, keep location on, right? Things like this establish a foundation to them to understand the respect and relationship between the device and themselves and their parents.
Yeah, that's really great. Putting the phones in one location at the end of the night can help the parents too, because I think for many of us, we want to reach for our phones at off hours. We're always working longer than we should be. And if we practice what we preach, that can be a good sign also. So those are very good tips. And especially now in pandemic with all the kids working at home and school, while us working at home as well as the kids at school, it's been very hard to find individual places for them to do their work and things like that. So the tip on having that door open and having the screen facing the door is a good idea also. And then, like, what tips can you give to control the individual usage of a device or an app?
Yeah, sure. So controls are really important because controls reinforce the access. I always tell parents giving your child a device without any controls is like giving them a supercar without brakes, right? It's highly dangerous, highly risky, and it's really important we put those in. So kids nowadays are very smart. They know how to use their devices better than us. So it's really important we put those controls in place prior to giving them the device because they could easily find a way to circumvent it before the controls are enabled. But there is a whole host of controls you can use. One of them is whenever a app needs to be installed, have it require parental approval, right? And that kind of gives you two fronts. The first front is actually on a fraudulent perspective. So a lot of parents have reported that their kids are racking up charges in these micro games, right, that are tagged to their credit card. And that's a really big thing we've been seeing. There's been news stories about it all the time. So every time an app needs to be installed and a child needs parental approval for a purchase or anything like that, that helps stop that. And the second one is it actually gives the parents an idea of what's actually going in the child's phone, right? It helps mitigate them downloading unsavory applications or potentially getting them to understand what the child is using the phone for on a daily basis. And the last piece on this is when I say controls, it's not just locking down a phone or a computer. You can actually use controls for applications. So the popular ones, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, these all have parental controls that can be enabled and they can be used to block who can message them, right? Or view their stuff or see their location. So these controls are really, really important to help lock down that access we talked about before.
I have a family member whose younger daughter has decided that she would like her own YouTube channel. She's very big into unicorns, and so she wants to share all her information about unicorns. And her 5-year-old self is very adorable, except that they're viewing her videos before they post them.
Right.
And there was the one where she mentioned that she was hoping all her unicorn friends would stop by her house at 123 Main Street so that they could talk about unicorns. And there was the discussion of, no, we don't share where we live online. That's not what we do. It scares me a lot because I have 6 grandchildren myself, one of whom has done what you mentioned, Josh, of purchasing an app without the parent knowing it. He did that once, only once. So when we do try to set these controls, Josh, is it a parental control? So like for Twitter or for Facebook, is it something that goes across everyone's account then in the house, or are they doing it for each user?
Yeah, so typically they're doing it for each user. There are some monitoring controls that you can use in place, like Apple families or Microsoft families, where you can set these controls and have it all linked to one family account. And we've seen those typically used that's more of the, I guess, built-in features to these devices, but there's actually paid options you can use. I'm sure some people have heard of Life 360 or Net Nanny or Bark, all these applications you can use that'll actually monitor across all devices, right, with one account, and that gives kind of robust reporting. It's really amazing what they can do nowadays. They can search for keywords like cyberbullying or harassment or depression, and it'll give you actually alerts when these things happen. So you can do it really 2 ways, whether it's across one device or multiple devices. So monitoring can really help reinforce those controls as well.
That's great. And that touches on something that I know is really dear to you, Laura, and that is our children's mental health and how the usage of all this social media and internet access is affecting that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Years ago, I heard a woman on a podcast compare giving our kids a phone to giving them the keys to our cars. And we would never just hand our kids our car keys when they hit a certain age. They know that in order to be safe and properly learn how to drive, they have to first study and pass a written test. Then they have to practice how to drive. And nowadays, a lot of parents are paying for these lengthy driver's ed courses. But with devices, lots of times we're simply handing them to kids, sometimes as young as 9 years old. And these are devices that can open them up to predatory behavior and harmful content in a variety of ways. And we're doing this without, any providing them with any education, protections, conversations, or tools to navigate that whole world. So what we're seeing is mental health, physical health, and our kids, even our kids' ability to develop social skills can all be impacted by too much screen use. So the research, it tells us that spending too much time on social media really contributes to childhood and teen anxiety and depression. Anxiety, before the pandemic in kids was at a very high rate. And, since the pandemic, it's totally exacerbated it. But it was already bad to begin with. And, today's kids, they're constantly connected to social media, and it can be hard for them to not to compare their lives to others based on what they see being posted.
I have a hard time doing that sometimes. All my friends taking pictures of their dinners and where they're going and things like that.
Oh my God, totally. And, of course, there's other factors that contribute to, the high rates of anxiety that we're seeing, like genetics, brain chemistry, personality, life events. Today's kids have there's so many high expectations and pressure to succeed in school. And then they just live in a world that feels scary and threatening. Like when we were growing up, we didn't have to do lockdown drills in school. There's also, obviously, the pandemic is scary. So technology is definitely a problem when it's unregulated and unsafe for our kids. But with that being said, I really think that the technology isn't as much the enemy as our bad habits are. And, we live in a very different world than the one that some of us grew up in. Some of us, I don't know how the world I grew up in. So we can, of course, use our discretion and tell our kids they can't have a phone or access to certain apps. But I've found that when kids are deprived completely of something, they'll, in this case, go and create that account anyway. If you're saying, no, you can't have Snap, we've come across lots of kids that are like, they create a ghost account their parents don't even know exists.
Yeah.
So it's really our job to keep, I think, those lines of communication open and to set limits around, screen use and good habits around phone use. Josh, mentioned a lot. To stay on top of ways that we can use the technology to protect our kids. Like Josh referenced a lot of those, like Bark and Life 360, those kinds of things. I think the problem with screens in general is not the use of them, but the overuse of them. So there's been a lot of research about, that passive use of these screens, like scrolling through posts without any kind of interaction with the content. And that's been associated with lower well-being and life satisfaction. Whereas research has shown that active use, in which it was being used to directly communicate with others or gaming with others in a social group, or when you're creating content, that's not associated with negative effects. And it may actually have a slightly more positive impact on well-being and perceptions of social support over time. So interesting. Yeah, with regard to keeping our kids safe, I just think that very young kids should be more supervised, obviously, in their usage. I don't, when I see kids in strollers with a device in hand, I feel like I think the later you can start, the better. If it's not needed, it's not needed. I think that it's good for the kids to look around them and explore the world around them, and they're not doing that when they're just looking down on a tablet. I think we do, when they're little, have to watch and play alongside them when they're on there, and really be cognizant of what they're watching. I actually had a friend who, her son heard something on the bus. He was very young, I believe 8 or 9 years old, and he came home and Googled it. It was something inappropriate about being a brown noser or butt kisser or something like that. So he came home, he Googled that. Yeah. And imagine what popped up. He had headphones on. He had headphones on as being exposed to all this pornography. And mom had no idea. She sees him on the couch, using his screen with headphones on. And for like 2 days, he was watching this horrible stuff. And when she saw it, she walked past and saw it. she was, taken aback. He was crying because he was confused. But it was eye-opening for her to really just taking a peek. I love what Josh said about having the computer facing you when you bypass their room, if it's going to be in there. And of course, older kids, they may have more autonomy, but we still need to explore what technology's out there to protect them, but also to continue to have check-ins and conversation about the platforms they're using and its content. I mean,
it is really dependent on the age, but also the maturity of your child, what device and app that they're using.
Absolutely. That's it's so true. This can't be the same across the board, I think. Each child does have a different maturity level, and it's not, I tell my daughter all the time, it's not that we don't trust you, it's that we don't trust, what's out there, and that we have to, and, I think as parents, we get nervous, like we're invading privacy, but it's not an invasion of privacy to look at your kids' accounts. I mean, you own that device and you're responsible for doing your best to keep your kids safe. So I really think that it is dependent on the maturity level for sure. But I still think everyone should be setting limits no matter what the age is. Really clear limits, phones, iPads off at least an hour before bedtime, like totally off so that you can get to sleep. I encourage my kids, I heard this also on a podcast, and ourselves even when we wake up in the morning, to create before we consume, which really,
interesting.
Instead of turning around and picking up that phone, we take a minute, think about our day, before we start absorbing other people's thoughts, kind of check in with your own thoughts, your own day, take a minute to just set some intentions for your day. Have your coffee looking outside the window instead of looking on Instagram, So I really try to encourage that in my kids too, to wake up, be present when you're eating your breakfast. Remember that, I just became aware of this recently when talking to a friend, totally forgot that any device with access to apps can be used in the same way as a phone. So I've heard a lot of parents say, oh, she doesn't have a phone yet. She's not old enough, but she has an iPad, and kids without phones and phone numbers can still text and send videos through their iCloud accounts. Yeah. So, there's still room for, bad things to happen in that case. So I think we have to also educate our kids about how their devices work. For example, something as simple as explaining, because I know a little boy that this happened to, when you send a text or video, it's out there in the world for good. And, if you send that to someone else, and that this child thought that deleting it on his phone would make it completely go away everywhere he sent it to.
That's right. I think there's some adults who think that too.
Yeah.
So it's a great reminder because yes, once it's out there, it's out there. You can't take it back.
Yeah, we tell kids in our programs that what you post is like a tattoo. It's forever.
Yep.
And before you post it, we say to use the think strategy, the think method. And this is all over the internet. I don't know if can you see this here? But it basically says before you post, the T is for, is it true? The H is for, is it helpful? The I is for, is it inspiring? The N is for, is it necessary? And the K is for, is it kind? So even like taking that and like posting, laminating it and putting it on your fridge, something as simple as that, just to remind your kids about proper phone etiquette.
That's excellent. When you and I were talking earlier, when we were planning on this, you mentioned something that I really loved, because like I said, I actually am a grandma myself, but the grandmother test, explaining to your kids what that is.
So that's another, in the Brave Project, we talk about all of these things. We talk about, it's like a sexual assault prevention program, but it's also, we spend lots of time talking about cyberbullying. And basically we tell the girls, you got to make sure that your post is going to pass the grandmother test. And it's basically just saying that, is this something that your grandmother would approve of if she saw it? What would grandma say? And, to really think about that before you put it out there. That's just one way to get them thinking. Even things like if you don't hear back from someone, you don't keep sending them messages. Teaching kids that it's completely disrespectful to post a photo of someone without their permission. and getting the habit of, asking your friend first if you can post a picture. I mean, I know when people share photos of me that I don't really like how I look in them, it's upsetting. I don't want that out there. So, but people do it without even thinking. And I think this goes for parents too. I never post any pictures of my children without asking them first. I don't just put it up there. So I think we as parents have to do the same for them and say, I want to post this of you. Is that okay? And get them in the habit of hearing this so that they don't just, take pictures of people and just put it up there. There's been so many instances where kids have gotten bullies because, a photo has been taken of them that they didn't want out there in the world. And now there's all these negative comments being made. In my programs, we like to remind the kids that social media shows the highlight reel of people's lives, right? Not the everyday behind the scenes, not so great moments. And I just remind kids, about that, like they forget that. But that it's not always based in reality.
Right. So, Laura, your programs do touch a lot with children themselves. You're out there with them in groups and things like that.
Yeah.
What is it that you talk to them about cyberbullying and how to approach their parents, who to approach? Because I think so many of them feel like they're stuck in a situation and they don't know what to do.
Right. Well, yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to have programming like this and like the ones I run. So first of all, so that we can be in person together and have conversations about these things. We spend a lot of time, to prevent cyberbullying, just talking to this one program I'm thinking of is for girls, but then I have another one. It's called Selfies, Screens, and Memes. Oh my. And it's all about the impact of overuse of screens on our minds, muscles, manners, and mood. And we talk about how I showed them a little clip from, there was a Netflix show called Brainchild, and they did a great show about social media. And we watched that show and we talk about it. And basically just reminding kids, you don't want to text anything. Lots of times people get bold on social media because they're behind a screen, even a lot of adults. You don't want to text anything that you wouldn't say to somebody in person. And then if someone is, when we were growing up, again, the bullying stopped when you got home. It either happened on the bus or in school, but then when you got home, it was over. And now these poor kids, the impact on their mental health, it doesn't stop because of the access. So, really encouraging parents, again, to keep that dialogue open with their child, to know what's going on in their phones. I checked, I every now and then check my, both my kids' phones, and I saw some language being said in one of the conversations, and I was like, what is up with this language? Like, I don't want to see you using this language. I don't want to hear it. So, and I did see some negative comments, like, bullying is repeated behavior. So there's a difference between being rude and being bullied. When bullying is nonstop, it's repeated, it's affecting the person's, they don't want to eat, they don't want to go to school. So I do talk to kids about, there's a difference between someone being mean and rude and like hardcore bullying. I think sometimes kids just throw that word around, bullying, without really understanding what it entails. So really just around these things,
Yeah.
Kids like that, and anything can be screenshotted and passed along to others. And lots of times it's done out of context and it can be used to like hurt other people's feelings. So, yeah.
Laura, that's a really good point around the screenshots, right? Is because some of these applications try and record when people take screenshots, but what they don't account for is the fact that you can take a phone of somebody else's phone and they can't see it, right? So it's really interesting to think about that.
Yes. Yeah. And, this is kind of off topic, but we talk a lot to parents about, or kids, I remind kids in the screens class that we teach that we encourage them to be active 15 minutes for every hour of screen time. So if they're on a screen for 3 hours, that equates to, they should be getting 45 minutes of activity, to kind of put it into perspective for them. Because when you talk about like the kids' physical health, and even today I'm seeing a lot of kids that just aren't making eye contact when you're talking to them. They're so used to not looking at people's faces. And again, the pandemic has played a huge part in this, of not being around people. But really, most experts agree that 2 hours a day should be the limit for screen use. And For some people, that sounds like, what? That's nothing. But that's really, what they're suggesting. And they are suggesting if you're going to be on it, then make sure you get that physical activity in. So I tell people, go for a walk with your kids.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Going for a walk, no screens or phones at the dinner table. I tell my kids, there's no need to bring your phone to a family party. If you're going to bring it, it stays in their bag. There's no need to be on a phone at a family party. It drives me crazy. Those family parties when I was growing up was what life was all about, interacting with people, laughing, jokes. And when you're on a phone the whole time, you're missing out. And I ask kids, what do you have going on in your life aside from gaming and social media apps? And what lights you up, besides Xbox or Roblox? What are you into? Are you into sports, music, theater, art, books, and even coding? And, I encourage them and their parents to find that spark and like enroll them in programs that support it, or programs that teach about topics like this in a proactive, fun way, or programs about mindfulness, empathy, really instilling empathy in children early and often in life, I think can help with preventing cyberbullying, and encourage them when they know about mental health resources. It'll encourage them to say something if something's happening to them and not bury it. So the Brave Project, actually, we touch on all of this. It's actually coming up November 6th. That's a shameless plug.
No, that's okay. Plug away.
And it's just a hands-on self-awareness program. I hired she actually works for family services with crime victims, and she's seen some horrible cases around what we're talking about, where things have gone very, very badly. A child met up with who she thought was going to be a friend. It wasn't a friend, and she was hurt very badly. So this is a hands-on and this woman not only works with victims of crime, but she's a certified self-defense instructor. So we teach the girls how to keep themselves safe physically. And then also we teach them about digital boundaries, healthy friendships, and just supporting one another as females.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excuse me, Laura, could you put that a link in the chat maybe to that? And then for the replay, we'll do a screenshot at the end where we can give everyone some resources. And speaking of resources, Josh, we were talking just last week about this new event, if you will. The week of October 18th, commonsense.org has declared that Digital Citizenship Week. What are some of the resources that they have available?
Yeah, so they've got a lot. And for all ages too, they've got material from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade of really teaching kids how to be better online citizens. They educate them on privacy matters, cyberbullying, harassment, having relationships with their parents and how technology comes into this. And a lot of the things that Laura mentioned, right? The eye contact, the establishing social communications, and not just relying on the devices in front of you. So they've got a lot of great free material. I'll drop the link in the chat too. And they also have some parental controls that I talked about as well on how to secure TikTok, on how to secure Twitter. And these are really important things that, these are tools that are out there for us to use.
Yeah. And I believe that the Digital Citizenship Week also has materials for teachers as well. So if they wanted to incorporate it into their actual lesson plans that week, that would be great. And they're free resources, I should say.
Yeah, they've got lesson plans, videos, a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I love that website. It's one of my favorites. Common Sense.
That's great. And Laura, people can find out more about the BeBrave.com and all the work you do with a lot of our young people. Do you deal with all age groups with that group?
Yeah. So it all started with, I started a flag football empowerment program for little girls, just based on the way that I wasn't loving the programs that were out there for my then 4-year-old daughter. And then from that came all these other programs that I just was thinking of in working with the girls. And then my background is in working with crime victims. So I had seen it all, lots of horror stories. So trying to figure out, how to get to kids early and often and talk to them about using their voices. And so it all morphed into this company. And So we have like programs on screen use, the Brave Project, the flag football program for little girls. It starts at age 3, and it goes,
Wow.
yeah, it goes to 11 years old. And then we have a little group for boys. It's the girls is the Pigskin Princess Project, and the boys is the Pigskin Prince Project. And with the boys, it's an anti-bullying program. We're talking about what real bravery looks like. It's not about scoring a million touchdowns. It's about when you find your voice and stick up for the boy that's being picked on maybe by one of your friends. So we talked to kids about all this kind of stuff. And I wanted to mention, on Instagram, because, I feel like there's so many teachable moments with kids. Like right now, I don't know if you've heard of the TikTok challenges.
Yeah.
One was to destroy bathroom property or something.
Right, which
Josh?
I don't know about you, but in high school, my bathroom was already bad enough. It didn't
Yeah,
need
they call it the devious lick, and I'm going to get mocked and memed probably for this, but it's called the devious lick challenge. And what they try and do is they try and steal a piece of school property and show it off on TikTok.
Okay. And then the other one was October. They said was Slap a Teacher Month.
Smack a Teacher Month, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. So even that is a perfect teachable moment where you can sit down with your kids and say, yeah, I heard about these ridiculous, challenges going on TikTok. And then again, you open that door to have a conversation.
That's when you go back in your feed and you show them the ice bucket challenge that we all did 5 or 8 years ago, raising millions of dollars for a nonprofit rather than something silly like that. Yeah.
Technology for good, for sure.
Right.
But yes, I did want to say about the fact that we have to really check ourselves. And I think I said it briefly before, but how often are we on our devices? I think it's important to check, our own behavior as adults. We know not to meet someone that we befriend online alone, or buy a pill from someone off an app, which there's been horror stories about, kids that are experimenting with drugs will buy something and end up, dying the first time they take it. But how is our own screen use affecting our own engagement with our loved ones, or lack of engagement? And, are our phones on our nightstand dressers? Are they the first thing we look at in the morning? Are we on them most of the day? Like if we're serious about setting limits about, around this stuff, we have to really, really walk the talk. So I just think the key is to continue to be a presence in our kids' life. And it's not a one-time conversation when you hand them the phone.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And we can use so many moments to open up dialogue,
Yeah, I think that's a perfect reminder as we wrap up here that our children really do look up to us. And so what we're doing with these devices and our own interactions on the internet are affecting them, whether we realize it or not, whether they're sitting there watching us and seeing the actual screens that we're working on, or they just know that, like you said, the phone is attached to our hand 24/7. It's sending a message. And so Josh, your tips on controlling the apps with all the parental controls and actually the monitoring tools has been very helpful. And Laura, all of your insight into helping us keep our kids safe mentally, as well as we still try to give them a little bit of independence as well.
Yeah.
So
I just put something in the chat too. Just a person that I follow that's a huge cybersecurity expert that I go the time. So if any parents are interested, her name is Katie McPherson. She's in Arizona, but she's amazing. So
that's great. I'm going to write that down myself.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate your time. And we're going to be playing this back on our website, so our members will be able to see it at their leisure. And Hudson Valley Credit Union is, of course, always concerned about cybersecurity. I mean, that's Josh's job. He's keeping us safe, and we keep your account safe. And we hope that you've gotten a little bit of insight tonight into how to make your children safe in the cyber world. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.